Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
So welcome once more to our ninth meeting. I believe it is. I always try to keep the count. But welcome to the CCC meeting once more. Today we're gonna have a really full agenda, so we're missing one person, but we're gonna get started. And also we would like to have the opportunity to get some discussion going at the end and talk about two specific topics that we wanted to that were pending from last meeting. One of that is finalizing the budget, the marketing piece, and also the working groups, which we're gonna have some time today to subdivide and be able to work in groups, and moving forward, that's how we're gonna be able to be more effective in the community. We're gonna start by saying our names, and we're gonna start with Delegate Wilkins.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here this morning. My name is Janelle Wilkins. I represent District 20 in the Maryland House of Delegates, which is in Montgomery County.
Morning, everybody. I'm George Escobar, and I'm the Chief of Program and Services at CASA.
Hi, Keisha Morris. I am the Census and Mass Incarceration Project Manager at Common Cause.
Hello, I'm Angelique Mason. I pastor a church on the Eastern Shore in Caroline County, and I'm also a co-director for Bridge, Maryland.
I'm Lauren Zuppel with the City of Gaithersburg, and I'm out Mary Washington.
Senator Washington said she had to take a call, so she'll be back.
Bill Ariano, President and CEO of Baltimore Community Lending.
It's Rob McCord, Secretary of Planning.
Lillian Castillo, co-chair.
Walkiria Poole, co-chair.
Andre Harrison, director for Maryland Census.
Randall Nixon, Associate Director for Maryland Census.
Marianne Breckney, President and CEO, Korean American Women's Society.
John Odukoya, pastor of Fountain of Life Church and president of Fountain Community Enrichment.
Natasha May, legislative director, Maryland Association of Counties.
Zach Hans from MSDE sitting in for Dr. Salmon today.
Oh, thank you. We're gonna move on in the agenda, and we'll talk about the budget update, and we'll have Secretary Rob McCord.
Right. Let me give you an update of that and some more what I've been up to since we last met. I went with your co-chair, Walkiria, to a faith-based forum in Landover. That was a very good event. It was more than 4 dozen pastors easily from African American Latino churches. I was able to speak to them clergy to clergy since I'm ordained, and I was able to explain the vows I take at ordination, and then we talked offline and online about baptisms and weddings and funerals and preaching and prison ministry. I spend a lot of my Sunday nights 4 hours at the county jail. We also reviewed the Faith in Us message that we were putting out, making available, harnessing the power of people of faith to respond to the civic duty to be counted. I'll share the message with you. Living in a state founded on religious freedom means our prayers are not always the same. Our prayers may be different, but our civic mission must align. Once every 10 years, we must all be counted. The 2020 census count will help direct funding for programs and services that provide a benefit to all of us, as well as assistance to the most vulnerable of us. Our faith traditions, each in their own way, call upon us to consider our responsibility and our actions toward others. Each person of faith can do their part in raising a voice for others by participating in the census and by encouraging others to do so. Every census tract is actually part of a community that contains people with hopes and dreams and challenges. Each also contains children and seniors who will benefit from a full and complete count. Just by being counted, we can bring hope for an equitable distribution of resources based on the number of individuals actually living in each of those communities. People of faith can be counted upon not to turn away from challenges affecting our humanity. We must stand up to be counted so that each community can be accurately represented. Respond to the census. It's important, it's easy, and it's safe. Encourage your friends and neighbors to respond. There is faith in us, the census is us, and we will respond. So that sentiment was the beginning of my part of that meeting, and it's a part that I'm happy to play in my other role beyond my secretarial role. So I also present to the cabinet the international sub-cabinet and the International Sister Cities Board, the state agency CCC, the congressional districts CCC meeting in Annapolis, together with our friends from the U.S. Census. There's a part that I'll share with you that I've been using when I get to speak about census. And I ask people to jot down this number. And they immediately think it's a phone number. So it's 411-675-5001. And then I remind them that you don't need to call that number, because as I present, you're going to learn what that's about. And that 411 is information. It's information about people that's kept confidential. That information is critical to making decisions, and information that's kept confidential. The confidentiality provision was echoed time and again by my counterpart on the panel, Ron Brown from the U.S. Census. The information not shared with any government agencies. Personal information must be kept confidential. Personal information never shared. 72-year blackout period for any information from the census that ties a person to a particular piece of the census. And then that oath of each census worker takes, aligned with the $250,000 fine and the 5 years in prison if they violate that. It's a lifetime oath. So that 411 is about information. 675 is the number we hear always as the amount of federal funding available, $675 billion. That's divided up based on census information. And then the 5001 is the example I use of your area that has 7,500 people living in it and 5,000 people respond to the census. And then when there's an issue and we have hexamexo bad flu, just like Australia got through, they just finished their winter, really bad flu season. If the US government sends 5,000 doses of flu vaccine to your area and the 5,001st person in line, it doesn't matter their color, it doesn't matter who they voted for, it doesn't matter whether they speak English, it doesn't matter whether or not their immigration status is citizen or not citizen. Those folks have the potential. That 5,001st person could be infected, become sick, and affect the rest of us. It is about making sure our communities are accurately represented. So that is the phone number I give out. That's not a real phone number that people can remember, 411-675-5001. That concept keeps everybody on track for what we're about. The presentation includes a couple other things. Only one thing I'll remind people from the presentation that I've been giving lately is that the Department of Planning for the past several years have been working hand in hand with the U.S. Census Bureau to align addresses, to make sure everyone gets counted based on where people could be living. And we have identified 130,000 addresses that were either missing or misaligned. 130,000 addresses are now going to be correctly part of the census process. So if you use if you just use a 2.5 number for the number of people per household, and the number is probably closer to 2.68, but 130 times that, times the $18,250 over the 10-year period, that's $6 billion worth of potential that we've identified just by making sure we know where the addresses are. And address mistakes happen all the time based on, like, if you live at 325 North Main Street, but you're coded at 325 South Main Street, or South Main Street doesn't even have a 325 in it, then we've realigned that. We've made sure we've caught 130,000 of those. So the efforts to make sure that we have the addresses correctly identified are a critical part of one of the pieces we've been doing for the past few years. It started with the local update of census addresses. I had an important meeting with the Secretary of the Department of General Services. General Services is taking over the procurement process in the state. So the Secretary, his Assistant Secretary, and others regarding review of existing state contracts. That process happened early on at my request, and then I wanted a meeting with the DGS Secretary. So we had been involved in trying to utilize existing contracts, and none were identified back when I first asked about it. We explained that I'm focused on finding a marketing consultant for the use of the CCC. And DGS came through with an option that we're exploring. The Deputy Secretary and I met with DGS to keep it moving and to learn what we need to do to modify the contract to add additional scope of work. We expect to be under contract as soon as possible. It's not my speed because it's governmental, so I'm pushing as quickly as I can. And once that consultant's identified, I'll have them meet with the co-chairs and then potentially meet with the work groups as soon as possible. And I'll be able to tell you much more about who the consultant is and what they cost once the contract is executed. So in-house at Back Planning, we've been brought a part-time media relations consultant on board. We've been meeting to formulate education and motivation campaign along with messaging to be ready to go right after the holidays. The consultant's also meeting the data center to analyze low response profiles in each part of the state, along with the overall demographics in each jurisdiction. We brought on, I might have mentioned last time, a part-time graphic design person on board to enable us to customize some of the items in our toolkit and continue to develop count media materials available for anybody to use just by accessing our site. We are in the final stages of finalizing an addition to an existing state contract to provide generalized and targeted outreach, including digital, text messaging, and email outreach to existing customers of the state and then to others. This existing contract is managed by the Department of Information Technology. So we're working with them to make sure that we can have some targeted outreach to people that are already using state services. Lots of the people using state services are people that we want to make sure do not go uncounted. I've been in discussions with our Deputy Director at MHT, who's overseeing our census grants, Agency Counsel and Assistant Secretary of Operations, and the Executive Director at MML to try to move from proposal to a grant agreement. And since you last met, we were able to hire an additional grants administrator. That is something that I told you we were unsuccessful in at least 2 recruitment efforts on. So we have an additional grants administrator at MHT. This gives us the additional bandwidth that we didn't have when I reviewed the proposal the first time. Now we're able to manage the grants at planning. We're working to have those applications reviewed, recommendations made for funding, and planning to keep control of the administration of those grants. This will allow more funding to go to the municipalities, many of which have significant pockets of hard-to-count populations. So at this point, it looks like that I'll be considering recommendations from a panel put together to make the recommendations to me. The MHT Deputy Director will be overseeing the grant process, and we will have the grants administrator that we just brought on board. She's a lovely and excited person working on this project. So I told her I have more work for you, and she was just kind of bringing it on. So she's excited about the process. So we will try to get that process going. I've approved one grant for Garrett County, is my recollection at the moment, has submitted for a county grant. So I'm happy to report that the bandwidth issue that we had an issue with has been resolved by the efforts of the Maryland Historical Trust to be persistent in trying to get someone on board. So that will make that process be a lot. It's more of a burden on us, but it's, I think, a better process after we've listened to everything that's happening. So I wanted to give you that update, and I wanted to leave as much time for the Census Bureau's programming today for the Census Solutions Workshop that has been reported back to me as going very well everywhere that it's been done. It helps people focus on what is going to be important for specific areas, and you have co-chairs identify specific areas and assign people to the groups. But the process of, that you're gonna go through with the Census Bureau will work very well with when I get you a marketing person on board. So that's as fast as I can possibly go during the process of this effort. And I'm trying to make sure that everything I do is legal. So I can't simply grab a contract that I like and say, let's do this. There's a process that I have to go through for every one of those things. So that's the most important thing from my standpoint. I touch base with agency counsel about how can I do this, how can I do that. I would have preferred to be able to introduce to you the person I was able to contract with, but I wasn't able to contract with anybody that quickly. And, but I'd be in contact with the Department of General Services when I leave this meeting today and set up the next step for what they need from me to make sure we can have something on board as quickly as possible. So I've had probably 3 meetings and intermittent telephone calls just to try to make sure I keep the process going. So I am, you know, there are other things in Department of Planning. We have a new assistant secretary coming on board. So lots of the things that have been rolling to me will be rolling to the assistant secretary. That position's been vacant since the end of August. So that will free me up to stay focused on some of the other things that we need to stay focused on. So I want to make sure that I gave you a kind of a full update, kind of where I've been since we've last been together. And I'm encouraged that we'll be able to get something done quickly. And I continue to insist upon it. I need it yesterday, so I continue to insist upon that. So if you can take my first set of comments as a suggestion to be assigned to the faith-based group, that would be fine.
Perfect, so that we can jump into the, thank you, Secretary. We can jump into the subgroups. I wanna make,
Sorry, I have a question.
sure, yeah.
You got?
Yeah, let's do that. I just wanted to make sure in the meantime, you can ask the question. I wanna make sure that you take a look at this form, where you have your name, and while you ask those questions, if you think that you need to be reassigned to a new group, just let us know before we subdivide into groups. So just take a look, think about it, and let's open it up for questions. And then I'll tell you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for that overview. It sounds like we are moving forward in some of the areas that the committee has requested. I just want to make sure to start that I understand the different hiring contracts. So it sounds like we are getting under contract with an overall media and marketing person or company that will take the lead around the media and marketing efforts. That's something that's underway, right?
That's underway.
Okay, then there is a part-time media consultant that is on board now. Is that correct? Okay, and then there's also a part-time graphic designer.
Yes.
And a grants manager that has been hired.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay, so have I covered all of the kind of staffing and all of that?
That would be an update.
Okay, wonderful. So in terms of the person the company that we're looking to get under contract, it sounds like we are in a position where our backs are against the wall, we kind of take what we can get, so I understand that. But in terms of their experience, I know you can't talk specifically right now about what company it is, but can you talk about their experience when it comes to working with targeting diverse populations, developing messaging that can reach, our immigrant communities, our faith communities, other communities, and also where the messaging is being derived from, the messages that we're using, where that is being derived from.
Right. I can't talk specifically about the particular contractor, but the contractor would be coming from a situation that has to cover lots of different, it's not a contractor that has to deal with lots of different populations to begin with. So I am confident that the person or the group that is under consideration will be able to make suggestions, recommendations for messaging that would hit everything we need to hit.
Do you have a sense, like, if they have experience having done that successfully before?
I can't say, I can't say right now, no.
Okay.
But my question will be how they will be able to get granted of these funds when we don't know specifically what they can offer to us. Just because we need to be really careful on this matter, specifically when we're talking about funds that belongs to the community. So there must be a lot of respect on in this aspect. I appreciate that we have identified a company that is willing to be able to get the funding, but what can they perform? Because it's not just about getting the funding, it's what specifically they can do in regards of the benefit of all Marylanders.
Mr. Secretary,
Yeah.
is there a possibility that maybe you can, I understand the contractual issues, but is there a possibility where there could be a designated work group within this board composed of the chair, of the chairs and another smaller group that can speak to this contractor about their background, about the expectations of the work before we really get into, just the reality of the situation, just so that, and then that group could report back to everybody else about what, to kind of ease, comfort level about their capacity.
I'm open to that, that's fine.
I mean, does that make sense?
But George, that's fine, I can.
So, couple other questions. In terms of the part-time folks that have been hired, is there an expectation that they're staying throughout, the full timeline around the census, like through July? Or is this like a temporary, the next 1 to 2 months? And are they here, are they in the room?
They're not in the room, they're not.
Okay, they're not here to me. Okay, is there an expectation that they're staying like through July through the full census implementation, or is it this like a short-term gap filling measure?
They will stay as long as I ask them to stay at this point. I'm working with contractual positions that are, I can say that they'll stay almost as long as I need them to stay.
Okay.
Are they gonna be working in other tasks in the Department of Planning, or just gonna be for census?
This is just for census.
Just for census? And are they gonna be available to work with the group, work groups that we're gonna be forming today?
That's a possibility, yes. But if we can get a consultant that just focuses on this group, that's what I'm working on.
And my other question on that, how are they gonna be, are they funded by the Department of Planning directly, or is that coming from the 450?
They're from my budget.
Okay.
They're from my budget.
Okay, so I just wanted to reiterate the question around the messages and where you mentioned that, messages are getting ready to go out. Where are we getting these messages from, and how are we targeting to make sure that different groups are receiving the messages that are most effective? Who are we engaging? How are we making sure that we have messages that work for our particular groups in Maryland?
We're still developing messaging, yes. We're still developing messaging.
How are you developing that? Is that research? Are you looking at existing research? How are we developing effective messages that work for targeted communities across the state?
I'm looking to my marketing and public relations person to help me figure that out. And they're looking at the data center to see where people are, what the characteristics are in each of those communities, and what's effective. And they're looking at what's been happening across the country also.
Okay, I just think it's very important that person, given that we don't know if the contractor has any experience in this, the part-time person is not here, I don't quite understand if they have experience in reaching targeted communities. We know that when you're talking to the Black community, how you're talking to the Black community about the 2020 census is a little bit different sometimes with, maybe non-Black immigrant communities. And then within the immigrant community, there's so much diversity, and I wanna make sure that whoever's developing these messages, the feedback and the input is coming from the ground up, and that they have the experience necessary to be able to develop those, and that we have a chance to look at them before they go out. I think it's very important that as the complete county in this diverse group, that we're not just getting some messages that we're supposed to push out without being able to react to them, give input, and that it's an iterative process. So definitely want to underscore that. One of my last questions, in terms of the funds used for the main company contractor, how much are you looking to allocate around that? What are we expecting to spend on that? And then also like material development.
The concept is to use, and I don't know what their cost will be to us, but what I've made clear is I'm considering that to try to keep them within the range of the first 150 that the community, that this, of the 450, the first 150 that is allocated here to this committee, and then the 300 to be used for media, and then where we can work together with messaging that would come generally and statewide from the Department of Planning anyway. So that's the general, but I don't know what the number's coming in at. So
Potentially 150 from for the firm, 300K around media, and then some other funds around message development. Is that what you're
the
saying?
150 would include the message development.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's roughly how I'm just sharing what I have in my head and what I've expressed, and
Yeah.
I have to see what they come back with.
So I think something that's missing in that is, what about materials that we can, at events, things like that? How are we gonna get the message out with physical materials for that are targeted towards different communities? So I think that that's something that's missing. I think we should all chime in around the other things that we'd like to see as you are developing this contract. We want to make sure, and that you have the part-time folks, the graphic designer, and all of that, that we have funds allocated to print some things. Maybe we should be doing some mail to supplement the Census Bureau's effort, but I think there's a lot of other things that we should be thinking about, and we know there's at least another $1 million that should be allocated towards this. So I'll just give other people the opportunity to ask questions, but those are some things that are top of mind for me.
Thank you. Thanks.
Secretary, sorry, I just want to ask something because I'm not clear on this. You have places, some individuals in regards to census, like designers, advertising, marketing. I just need to ask a question. If we have these individuals right now, why don't we work with them to implement these 450,000 instead of getting a shortcut of 150 to our company, when we know, I don't know how many of you have gone out for marketing and advertising, but marketing and advertising is extremely expensive. And if it comes out 150,000, it's a lot of money that we can get in real resources for the community to know about it. It's not that hard to manage the 450,000 allocating the right campaign to place it out if we have 3 individuals right now in the department that just dedicate themselves to work on the census. Is any chance that with all of us working here as a committee can get together with these 3 individuals and place a campaign together to implement the 450,000 and to make it more usable for the benefit of the state?
I would say it's not impossible. We can explore that.
I would appreciate that more instead of 150,000 going to a company, but we can bring it back to the roots and back to our community in understanding what it is.
Let me be able to tell you what the potential is for the contractor working for another agency right now is, and then we can examine that. So I'd be happy to.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
If I could just
You were, she was next.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment, piggybacking off of what Delegate Wilkins was saying, just to check in with the committee and maybe some of the expertise that is on this panel already. There are certainly groups that have already done messaging research for reaching out to hard to count communities in the African American community, Asian American community, Latino community that I have access to, and maybe some others do as well. So when we are developing messaging and materials, if these folks are, going off of, and this is particularly for 2020 census, that some of these researchers have already done. So to the extent that the committee can check in with other members about expertise that they may have to help move the process forward.
Thank you, to use the CCC as a resource.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you, yes.
Yes, thank you. And again, thank you for moving forward on our requests that have been outstanding. I think I want to better understand, because I don't want to sort of overestimate the staff that you've brought in, because there is the idea of having a marketing firm that is, professionals, and they're doing it, they're full-time. So the folks that are on board, because last week you talked about having interns from MICA, that's not what the graphic design, that's an actual, not. So this is a full-time person, and they're hired part-time?
No,
They're part-time?
Part-time.
Part-time contractual.
Part-time contractual.
It's a signed contract.
Yes.
All right, so what's their name?
I have a woman, hold on a second. I'm trying to remember the name of the graphic artist. Woolrich. Kim Woolrich. Kim Woolrich, can't remember first name, Kim Woolrich.
And does she have her own firm? Is she coming, okay, so you said you had a marketing and you had another person, what was the other position?
Yeah, it's the marketing and PR.
And this is part-time,
Yes,
contractual,
Yes.
signed contract,
Yes.
they're getting paid. So what's their name?
Dwayne Carey.
Dwayne Carey. And where are they, okay, and then there's a third one? So there's the grants, right, the grants.
He's a grants administrator.
Right, and that's part-time,
No, the grants
contractual?
administrator is a full-time
Is full-time,
position and the
okay.
Maryland Historical Trust.
Okay, so that's right. And that person's name is?
I do not know her last name. Her first name is Sabrina.
So we could start working with Ms. Waldridge and Mr. Carey today. The committee could.
Possibly, yes, yes.
They're getting paid right now to work on census, right?
Right.
Census 2020, and we're working on Census 2020 today. So, and they're not here today. Can you see the contract? They're not here today?
They're not here today.
Okay, are they working today, or could we call them in, and are they on staff, or will they be there tomorrow?
They won't be there tomorrow.
Will they be there, let's go, Friday?
Yeah.
We're just really trying to get a sense here. We're all ready. We've been talking about this for multiple months. We finally have them, and we have we have 3 people. I would have been excited to meet them, because I would think you could say to the committee, hey, I've done what you've asked me to do, here are the people, and we're here. This has been on the agenda that we're going to, so I don't want to continue to belabor it, but I do have grave concerns. If we could get folks and to work with the chair people to meet them maybe tomorrow, if they're on payroll, then we should be meeting folks, and we should be moving that forward. So I think that would be something that the committee, that I would, I don't know if I put a motion, but I would say that we'd like to meet folks as soon as possible, ASAP.
We'll be more than happy to go tomorrow.
Actually, friendly amendment to that? I think that's a wonderful idea, again, but could we talk to everybody? Could we have the media relations? Essentially,
Yeah.
it's just logistics at this point. We already have the firm. This is basically our only firm that we're gonna be working with, right? So can we get everybody together again, with a select group that includes the chair people, maybe, a couple of others from the committee that can then, we can talk about messaging, we can talk about best practices, we can share with them what we know about the research on the messaging that we've been talking about. We can at least get started with some foundational things, and also, give them guidance on where they can continue to do the research, where they can continue to explore different opportunities to leverage all of our resources together, right? Maybe by December when we meet, we can kind of have basically like an outline of what the next steps are, and actually start implementing a timeline to execute some of this stuff. Do you think that possible?
I will set that up.
And I wanted to clarify the budget, again. These people that were hired is coming from your budget. So we have our 450 that is there for the committee to work. And so last time when we spoke, we said it was gonna be below 200K that we were gonna allocate for the marketing. So now we said it's 150. And then the rest is gonna be allocated for the subgroups. So one of my goal or our goal is to, when we subdivide today, we also think about we got a budget for each of the subgroups, and we're gonna decide as a group where do we want to allocate the majority of the funding, if we think it's business, community, organizations, or hard to count, or faith-based. So we have to, as a group, I wanna make sure that we can come up with that number, and so allocating the amount for each of the subgroups that we have. We're good with that? So, and then part of what we're gonna do now, and I know time is running, is with the workshop that we're gonna be having now, we actually, Raj is gonna be the one conducting, is that you? I'm sorry, I was thinking. He's gonna be conducting the discussion. And one of the ideas that we wanna do is we wanna think about, as George was saying, by the time we meet next time, we're gonna have already a plan to execute in December. Now, because we're gonna be subdividing in subgroups, you are more than welcome to meet before the next meeting and kind of work together. I will recommend that each of the groups, pick a lead person who will be working and coordinating some of the work within the group. And then my last point is, are we good in the bucket that you guys you've been assigned?
Not me.
You wanna be
Yeah,
removed?
Because I don't have any business background, and
Okay.
I am in business work group, so I'll be fine either faith-based or hard to count.
Okay,
Not faith-based.
yeah,
Faith-based is fine.
yeah, that'll be perfect as well. Everybody else, yeah,
I like to move to hard to count.
move to cards of count.
And just reiterate around the budget, what I mentioned around materials and printing, allocation and translations as well.
Yeah.
Just wanna reiterate that, we need to make sure we have funds for that.
Okay, so we switching. You got it? Yeah. Okay, perfect. Anybody else? Okay.
And I'll switch into faith-based, just so that we have some coverage.
Okay, so you
So
want
I'll
me to
switch,
faith-based. So I think the business is the one that is kind of playing now because we lost one person. So we only gonna have 3.
Maybe the chairs can sit in there.
Yeah,
Right.
we'll okay,
assess
good,
with
good. We'll make sure that we keep the balance. Yes.
With 4 different state agencies involved in this, and good luck in being able to pull all these resources together. Who on staff is gonna coordinate the interaction between these agencies and the implementation, whatever does come out of the committee? Because you have 3 people that are under contract through the Maryland Historic Trust to you all, correct?
The grants administrator is the Maryland Social Trust.
Okay, so the grants administrator is, and obviously
That's the office
that's
that's
one
running.
line.
Right.
You have the contract through Secretary Churchill at DGS, and then you have Do It, which at times, because of the pressures that they have and just dealing with IT throughout the state, sometimes I think it's a little bit behind. Who's going to coordinate that type of activity within the department?
It'll be me at the moment, and I will be assisted by.
It'll be you at the moment.
No, it will be me
All right.
directing with my deputy and with the assistant secretary that's coming on board.
It's an awful lot of detail.
I know.
Just, all right.
Did our state agencies have a meeting or something recently to talk about the census? Did that happen?
On Friday.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think, are we gonna talk about that?
Okay. Secretary.
Yeah, we running late, but we can have a few more minutes to go through that before we break.
We, the secretary spoke at the Friday meeting and summarized the work that was done with the state data center, and I was in the process of handing off to the chief of staff, Adam Gruz, who is now handling state agencies. She's not here yet. The banners and the pocket documents were distributed to all the agencies that were there. There were 15 to 20 agencies that were present, and they have been working on their workbooks, which you all saw, finalized version of which you all saw, and they're in process of finalizing timelines and doing outreach. The Do It also is reaching out to finalize the authorization to do both headers and footers for the state, for census for each agency.
On their website.
On the websites, I'm sorry.
And then based on previous feedback, is the workbooks where they're identifying specific strategies to do proactive outreach more than putting a banner up in their agency or adding things to the website? Like, for example, MSDE should have a strategy around making sure that every single student is going home with this information. I've said literally at every meeting around commerce, developing partnerships with our businesses like Under Armour, to have t-shirts or to do some other in-kind support around the census. When are we going to see the targeted strategies where the agency that is strategically positioned to really help us take this to another level is implementing that intentional, proactive approach?
The workbooks have already outlined those strategies, and what we're doing with Engage with Do It is quantifying, creating metrics so that we can see both how many customers those agencies are touching and what their effectiveness is. So we're working with Do It, and we're also coordinating with our state data center in order to implement that so we can get information in real time.
All right, the last comment. I know MSDE is represented here pretty much every meeting, so I would like to hear at some point the specific strategy, because our 0 to 4, for example, are the hardest, are the most undercounted communities. So I would just expect that, especially MSD has been present every single meeting we've had, that they have probably the most robust plan around making sure that our students, we get the word out through our students, and a targeted outreach around our 0 to 4 population as well.
And just quickly on that, so I think also another critical time right now is open enrollment. It just started from first, right? It's a critical way in which to reach those under 5, especially in immigrant communities, especially in communities of color. So it doesn't sound like it's great that there's metrics. Maybe we can get a little bit more information about how that's, maybe get an update like by December. I know a lot of people don't enroll, really, they wait till the last period, but we only have a 6-week period in the open enrollment period right of this year. So it'd be great just to get a little bit of some updates specifically probably from MSDE and also from Oliver County enrollment eligibility workers, and how that's going, and where we can intercede, because we would still have time to intercede in December if we see them not accomplishing some of their metrics. It would just be helpful to get a little bit more information on how that's going, particularly now.
I'll follow up with MD, and they did speak at the state agency meeting.
Right.
And Debbie Lichter did say that they're engaged in that process, and they're using the U.S. Census statistics in schools pod, which is quite robust, and getting out to the schools. So we'll follow up with that and get you a detail.
Okay, well, this is great.